get its head around, because we haven't seen it. Now we're in a soft landing right now. I think the question is, do we continue? To your point, I think conviction on duration has to be a little less. So are we putting our entire risk on? No. Given the data right now, we might persist, we might stay in the soft landing. In that scenario, the Fed cuts to, let's say, 3%. So then how much can that 10-year fall? The 10-year then should probably be between 3.5% and 4%. We're not that far from that. So I would put less, I would put some risk on here in duration, just not max risk. If you start to see signs that the cracks that we've seen cracks in low-income consumers, small businesses, if they start to broaden out, if we start to see those job numbers, and I would say we don't look for negative payrolls. I think anything around 100, 150 is telling you that the unemployment rate's going to rise. Well, then you add a lot more duration. So mid-cycle correction would be, I would say, 200 basis points of cuts. Recession, we're talking a lot more. That's when I think that duration, the amount of risk you can put on duration, starts to increase.
Well, I just wonder how much of a canary in a coal mine was the Delta numbers yesterday, talking about oversupply and finding that's the first time I've heard a major airline talk about having oversupply in the cabins. Priya, we've heard the message loud and clear. You're now building towards a duration position. We had Padraig Garvey in the seat yesterday from ING, and he said, look, if Biden steps down at any time, and let's assume Kamala Harris steps in, if Biden steps down, he sees it as being a risk-off event and a driver of money into bonds. So just stand back from the noise of the politics at the moment. Would you see that kind of conjugation, in other words, a shift in the Democratic ticket, could be perceived as risk-off event for all the fiscal issues around it that may reverberate? Could you see that provoking a further leg up for duration?
So I think political risk is so hard to price in. These are binary risks. But if I go back a month, I think we were pricing in divided government. What happened in the last month was that probability of a Republican sweep increased, and I think people zeroed into to fiscal stimulus. So some of the rise in rates, particularly in the long end, has been this idea that the deficit will increase much more, that we're going to get fiscal stimulus. If that starts to go away, I think, yes, I think the knee-jerk reaction would be lower rates led by the long end, as this idea of either divided government or not as much fiscal stimulus starts to get priced in. But I will still highlight there are going to be many such opportunities. The market's shifting from one narrative. Remember, just a few months ago, we were talking on the show around, higher inflation, re-acceleration. Then there was concern around recession. I think we're seeing something very similar. So I think you're supposed to fade these extreme moves. Now, if today was end of October, I might say hold off, de-risk. But we've got plenty of time between now and the election. So I think if you get too much of the lower, I think knee-jerk, absolutely. But we'll be watching for, has damage already been done? So, but if it looks like the Democrats are gaining ground, the first move would be lower rates. But then if you get a Democratic sweep, I think rates might rise again, because then you might get more spending. So there's plenty of things that can move us. And I would say, let's try and fade some of those up until the election.
It sounds like a bifurcated bond market, traded right up until the end of October, and then review, redux, reload. Priya, thank you very much. Priya Misra of JP Morgan. Take your opportunities on this rolling bond market. Coming up on the show with Danny and I, the plot to persuade the president. Biden doubters grow in number, so do his lapses. More on the race to the White House. That's next on Bloomberg. Context matters every day from London and New York. Good morning.
The top names in business are on Bloomberg.
What I can say is that we've been making significant investments across the franchise, across regulatory reporting, across data, and across resolution and recovery planning. These are areas we've been investing in because we know the areas that, frankly, the industry likely needs to further enhance, and we certainly want to enhance them for ourselves.
Nobody covers business like Bloomberg. Context changes everything. Top names in global leadership are on Bloomberg.
China has started to provide Russia with different types of aid, not direct military aid, but issues linked to energy, sometimes even dual use of goods. I argue that Russia is so dependent on China right now that one phone call from President Xi Jinping would solve this crisis. If he were to say, time to start negotiating peace, Russia would be forced to do that. They would have no other choice.
I would like China to play a serious role. Russia really depends on it because they don't have another place to export many of their goods because of the sanctions. The president of Finland, Elina, he is right. China could play a tremendous role without weapons.
Nobody covers the top global leaders like Bloomberg Television and Radio. Context changes everything.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Shevrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stroud-Watts here in Sydney where the trading day begins. We're here in the centre of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering. We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.